Hey everybody, Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot. Today I got a not so surprising, a few days ago, article on Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And what was interesting here is billionaire Republican donors are now giving to Manchin and Sinema by Michela Tindera of Forbes magazine, dated February 4th, 2022. As Senators Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema stood in the way of President Joe Biden's agenda last year, the certain legitimate populist reforms of Build Back Better, they've attracted a support of a small but very rich cohort, billionaires who gave money to Donald Trump's previous campaigns. Wow. In 2021, Manchin and Sinema received campaign contributions from at least 13 billionaires who donated to Trump, including investor Ken Langone, Apollo Private Equity CEO Mark Rowan, Continental Resources Chairman Harold Hamm. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Wow. Wow. Billionaire activist investor Nelson Peltz donated to Manchin's campaign in 2017 and hosted a fundraiser for Trump in 2020. The investor explained his relationship with Manchin on CNBC in October, saying he has known the senator for a decade and calls him, quote, every week. Well, what about the average West Virginian? Do they have that kind of access to Senator Joe Manchin? I don't think so. This is why we live in a fake democracy. This is where liberalism has basically become illiberal. We have become an oligarchy with democratic trappings, a failed democracy, a fake democracy. And this is proving it. Kirsten Sinema was actively soliciting donations from at least one Trump billionaire donor. She attended a Houston fundraiser in January with oil and gas executives, including Oklahoma fracker Harold Hamm, who we just mentioned before. Minnesota broadcasting billionaire Stanley Hubbard, who gave to Trump in 2020, said that he donated to Sinema last year because a friend asked him to. And he said he thinks she's a good person. And this is Kirsten Sinema was originally a populist and a Green Party ally of Ralph Nader back in the day. And of course, Hubbard said she's absolutely right. The filibuster is really important. I think getting rid of the filibuster, we have mob rule. Okay, well, fuck you, Hubbard. Now what do we have been having for decades? Plutocracy, which is impoverishing the vast masses of our people and degrading their quality of life and pushing younger people to hate this country. I know personally younger people that have said they don't like what the United States has become because they don't think they have a freaking future here because of the people like Sinema and Manchin and Trump and many of these unpatriotic billionaires that care about more about their money and paying no taxes or lower taxes than having a strong United States of America. What happened? Okay, here you go. 2021, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer got a contribution from New York real estate billionaire Richard Lefrak, who also gave to Joe Manchin's campaign in 2021 and also donated to Trump. Billionaire investor Thomas Toll gave $750,000 to the Senate Leadership Fund and $711,300 to Joe Biden's joint fundraising committee on the same day in September 2020. Fake Democrats. Fake fucking Democrats. They should be kicked out of the party. If the Democratic Party was a pro working class, populist, civic nationalist party, if I was the head of the Democratic Party, I'd be like, bye bye, bye bye, get the hell out, Sinema, get the hell out, Manchin, become Republicans, become Reagan teabagger Republicans for all I care. Because that's what you are functionally, because you don't care about the people. Whenever you talk about fiscal responsibility, you ever notice when people talk about fiscal responsibility, it always hits the poor and the working class people? We're always asked, people like us are asked to bear the brunt of austerity. You ever notice that? When everybody says fiscal responsibility, run away from them. Run, 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 because they want to screw you. They want to destroy and degrade the standard of living that you have as an average American. Trust me when I say that. Just look at the history. Don't let them fool you with their Madison Avenue advertising, saying that they're pro-worker and pro-American, and they just want to preserve the wealth for future generations. Bullshit. Bullshit. Democratic Party that is in the New Deal mold. If it ever gets to that point, Manchin and Sinema should be kicked out. Unceremoniously kicked out. A radical civic nationalist United States. We control the Supreme Court, we control Congress, we control the presidency. We would immediately declare two things illegal. We would eliminate private donations in elections, period. We would shorten campaign cycles, so it doesn't require a lot of money to do a campaign. We would decree that TV stations and radio stations would have to open up to major candidates and have them air their views rather than paying for spots. And we would publicly fund elections too as well. And again, shorten the campaign cycles. Because, and I'm sure there'll probably be counterpoints to the reforms that I'm suggesting, and that's okay. But the goal is to not get people into power on, well, how much money can I raise? Because that's not going to get the best leaders. We've seen that. We've seen what a shit show our Congress is. It's do nothing, how unpopular it is. We talked about it in the last couple of shows, a couple of live streams. Congress, 16% approval rating. Well, because it doesn't do anything really good for the average American people. We will immediately ban, lifetime ban, for anybody who works for federal, state, or local government. And that includes senators and congressmen and congresswomen from lobbying for any for-profit organization or businesses or trade groups. And foreign lobbying would be banned. No American will be allowed to lobby for a foreign country, a foreign nonprofit, or a foreign business entity. I don't care if it's Iran to Israel to China to Canada. That's what they have diplomatic representatives and trade representatives for, and their UN missions in New York City. No exceptions. These reforms will be undertaken within a radical civic nationalist America within a year. If I had my own organization, I would have a staff that would work on these blueprints. I would have people like Craig Holman and others, people who are Ralph Nader, Craig Holman. I would have them join hands with national security people that I trust, that want to make sure that China and Russia don't gain further inroads in the American system, in the American political system. And we will work up plans to implement these reforms, and they will be done within the year. They will be done. Because I believe when you have a will to do something, you can make shit happen. You can make it happen. And most of all, we will use the media, a nationalized PBS and NPR, which will serve as our medium to disseminate our point of view so we can have proper representatives to do psychological and propaganda combat with the representatives of the private sector oligarchs and debate them and ultimately destroy them in the war of words. Because the best way to deal with bad ideas is more sunshine and more speech and a bigger megaphone to drown them out. That's what has to come. We have allowed our elites, our political, media, and corporate elites have been handed the stewardship of this country. Governance, public opinion, economic policy making. And for a first world country, they have embarked on a plan that will ruin this country. And that's what's happening. And I don't like what's happening. And Kirsten Sinema, she used to be for lowering prescription drug prices until she got massive donations from the pharmaceutical industry. And all of a sudden that went away, and she opposed that as positive aspect of Joe Biden's Build Back Better. That's a problem. You see, ladies and gentlemen, an elite should be defined as having the best minds, male, female, black, white, Hispanic, even LGBTQ. If their hearts are in America, I don't care. Why do people expect free stuff? I think people expect more for their tax dollars. I think that's what it is. So I don't like to call it, quote, free stuff. They're expecting more for their tax dollars to improve their lives of average people. So, and we're not getting the best bang for our buck. And it's not a question of big government versus small government. That's a bad formula used by corporate America to stymie efforts to actually have sound public policy making for the benefit of the vast masses of American people. That's the issue with our government. Our government is really not, for the most part, an independent entity. It has become, over the decades, more and more an appendage of corporate America. So my view on the elites is you have to get the best minds with the best intentions. And if you talk to average people out there, as I have in my workplace, my personal life, you have these people. I don't folks making policy based on theory rather than business. Well, I don't like people making, I don't want folks making policy based on theory rather than business. Well, I don't want people making policies based on failed theory and also Milton Friedman style business practices, or what's been called neoliberalism, which is deregulation, which financialization, free trade, totally open borders, engagement with our geopolitical enemies in the name of free trade and free markets, and destroying labor unions, which served as a good counterbalance to the abuses of employers. That's what I don't want. Now, if you think in terms of running a government like a business according to the precepts of an Aaron Feuerstein, who I talked about in my piece on anti-Semitism, then that's a different story, because you have, or Nick Hanauer and others who are more patriotic or progressive populist leaning business people, then that's a different story. But when you're talking about modern shareholder value trumps everything else business, or libertarian type business theory like Chainsaw Al of Sunbeam back from the 1990s, or Jack Welch or Jeffrey Immelt, then no, I don't want business people near our government. Those types of business people would be basically at times when warranted under the heel of our government, when they hurt their workers or they hurt our national security. A good business would take care of their employees, of course. But many businesses, larger businesses, view employees as commodities. And that has been reinforced by business schools and by business theory, by classical economics, by free market economics. And in some ways, that's alien to part of the American tradition. You look at the American School of Political Economy, you look at during the period of the most social peace in the United States, was from the 1940s until, well, really the 1950s, all the way until about the 1970s. It was comparative social peace. So that's the type of environment that I support. How much profit is enough? Although I don't want politicians making those decisions. Well, the politicians don't give a shit. That's the bottom line. They don't care. They want all these major corporations to make whatever profits at the expense of their employees, as well as communities and national security. So I disagree with that part. I'm not a libertarian. I'm virulently against libertarianism. I oppose the libertarians and the Reaganites as much as I oppose the communists and the National Socialists. I do want politicians to say, once again, that stock buybacks are banned. That, yes, corporations are going to pay more taxes and wealthy people, ultra wealthy people, are going to make more taxes, in part because their decisions forcing and strong-arming politicians to open up to China and Russia and trade and technology, well, they need to pay a lot fairer share to rearm the United States. So look at it as a war tax, if you will. So I have a major disagreement with that. So what I want basically is a much more balanced situation, equilibrium between labor and capital in this country. And I want big business to be more patriotic. And they need to be forced to. And this is something why I call myself a radical civic nationalist. Radical civic nationalist. Not even a civic nationalist. I am no longer a conservative. I have not been for a long time. You have no issue taxing the rich with money isn't wasted. I totally agree with you. And corporate America, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your screen here. I'm sorry if I do. L Arriveman. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Whatever. Not asking you to use your real name either, obviously. But yeah, big corporations waste tons of money too as well. There's waste in the corporate sector as well. So and let me elaborate a little bit. What government programs do I support? There are a bunch. Oh, you were a Fed for 40 years. Cool. I'm not going to ask you which department or anything. So, that's private, but thank you for your service, especially if you were in the military, intelligence, or law enforcement, by the way. I would support massive infrastructure improvements, including rural broadband. I would support postal banking. I would support to get rid of the payday lenders. I would support, when it comes to infrastructure, obviously the road improvements. I would cut back on the need for toll roads. obviously, which is really starting to pop up like crazy in Florida down here where I live for years. I would support massive dredging operations, particularly in waterways that have been allowed to silt up, thereby preventing commerce. If any New Yorkers around here would know, New Jerseyans, the Passaic River, the Hackensack River, the Hutchinson River, they have Newtown Creek, Gowanus Canal, they have silted up because of toxic sediment. It's too expensive to be dredged. And that in part is because of the cost sharing agreements that have been imposed on business by Presidents Carter and Reagan in the Water Resources Acts. That needs to be really axed. I think in that area, we need to help industrial businesses thrive by footing the bill because water transportation is cheaper. I would support also hardening our electrical grid to prevent a disaster like an EMP attack. I would support a program of national civil defense where we would literally, where no longer civil defense is a privilege of the rich. Excuse me, let me plug in my computer here. I would also support public schools that are of national mandatory smaller classroom sizes. Oh, so you're an America First type. Cool. Glad you agree. I mentioned the civil defense, shelters, antidotes, storage for biological and chemical weapons attacks, hardened shelters to protect against fallout as well as nuclear blasts, anti-ballistic missile defenses as much as possible, both with missile sites, ABM sites, as well as also special interceptor planes to knock these missiles out of the sky. I would support tuition-free or strongly discounted tuition reimbursements, where I would, in the fields of engineering and other hard sciences, natural sciences, teachers, as well as engineers and other majors, which will help rebuild our country's industrial base and knowledge base. Where can we graduate people who can read and write? I think we need to reorganize the public education system away from the Reagan-Bush model of high stakes testings and cutting budgets and paying teachers like crap and shitting all over them whenever there's problems with the students, because that's what happens down here in Florida. And they were joined by these supposed leftists by Obama with Race to the Top, where it's like, oh, it's all the teachers' fault and we just got to privatize and do these crony privatization schemes. So what I would do is I would have these mandatory programs to have literally classroom sizes down to 10 kids. And that's going to require a lot of money. But if you cheap out on our kids and you don't listen to the teachers, the good teachers, the professionals, and common sense, then it's like you're not going to get kids that necessarily know how to read and write. And the fact of the matter is we could say, oh, what about the families? Well, there are a lot of kids that come from broken homes, or their mothers and fathers, because of the Reagan-Bush global economy, they have to work 2 or 3 jobs, which people like Ben Shapiro and the Randians, the Ayn Rand asshole types, seem to think it's fine. So that's not acceptable to me. So we're going to have to do some serious investing, and we got to restore home economics, learning how to cook, learning how to balance a checkbook. I praise several states for reinstituting financial education, how to balance a checkbook, how to operate a computer and other basic office equipment. That stuff is important too. Your life skills classes, that will be re-implemented in my public school programs, but it's going to require money. And I will have a national standard for teacher pay and benefits. And yes, I will sit down with the teachers' unions, and I view them, as long as they concern themselves with strict bread and butter issues, then I will work with them, unlike your Tea Party anti-union, anti-worker types. I don't like them. Accountability for teachers, I got to disagree with you. Most teachers that I was a teacher, I knew I wasn't cut out for it. I left the profession and found another one else. As a historian and critic, Diane Ravitch, and she was a supporter previously of the Bush reforms and turned around. And when she saw that the evidence was not creating better teachers and student learning, she turned against it and wrote a whole bunch of books. She said, according to her research, Diane Ravitch, most of the teachers that are, quote, the bad teachers leave the profession anyways. Either they realize after student teaching it's not for them, or they leave the profession within a few years. I mean, you look at the Teach for America program, which is supported by these let's hold the teachers accountable and blame them for all the problems for the schools. Well, Teach for America, the kids that teach in that, they burn out very quickly. So I would dump all the Bush, Obama, Rick Scott down here, Jeb Bush. Yeah, there are performance evaluations for many other professions, but the teachers, they have to deal with other people's problems. It's not like producing a product. It's not like going to a library or whatever. Here, when you're dealing with kids, you're dealing with multiple different personalities with baggage that they bring in, whether good, bad, or indifferent. And that is not the fault necessarily of the kids. It's just what our society has become. And I think we have put upon teachers, ironically, these anti-big government people like to say, well, let's expect the teachers to do everything to serve as the parents and the role models and the doctors. And now they're being asked to carry guns or protect the students. I mean, I agree with security guards and police, sadly. They're being asked to do everything and they're being paid like shit. It's ridiculous. So no, teachers are going to get a break. Now, if you're a shitty teacher and you molest kids or you fall asleep drunk at the desk, yes, that does happen. Obviously, people like that should be held accountable. But I see the problem is not that. I see the problem as a bigger issue of where the funding goes and all these pet reforms that have made the problem 10 times worse. And when it comes to agendas in school, I will teach American nationalism. And we will have a special service program that will bridge the divide between the races and the classes. And that will involve service projects with the military, if need be, or even packing care packages, the poor kids, the rich kids, the black kids, the white kids, packing toys to be sent to our military people overseas or whatever. Thank you for your service, or building homes for the homeless or whatever special national service. And I know the conservatives and the limited governments will think I'm a freaking fascist for saying it, but what solution do you have for the crazy class divides in this country? I was watching this video about the city of Miami. I was talking about it with my girlfriend who lives in Miami, and she does well. And we were talking about it. And I was talking about how one area you have the super wealthy, both foreign as well as American born in, Key Biscayne and Brickell Key, parts of Miami Beach, the Brickell section of Miami. And then you have like freaking Overtown and Opelika and even Hialeah to some degree, where it's like a totally different story and they're all isolated from each other and there's resentment and fear. If you're an America First nationalist, you have to prioritize what is your concern. Creating a sense of solidarity amongst all Americans, regardless of their class or race, or an obsession with, quote, free market liberalism. I made my choice years ago. It may feel great eating junk food for a bit, but then eventually the costs come in and the costs become real. It feels great. Yeah, you don't want to do anything. And you reflect back in the days you were the football stud and looking great, but at the end it all catches up and the bill is due. I don't want us to get closer and closer to that point. This is why I recommend radical reforms in this country. and this is the only way to save it. And I really appreciate El Arrive Man. I really appreciate all of your interactions there. I mean, you're not going to. There are probably certain things you don't like about what I'm saying. A lot of your sort of traditional constitutional minded Americans are not going to like what I'm going to say because it does require radical reforms. It requires some level of coercion that your hardened classical liberals, your Birchers, your many of your anti-communists will not like. But tell me, what solutions in the real world do you offer that will work? By the way, I also support lowering the retirement age to 55. I also support getting rid of right to work. I support a national health insurance program combined with the continued delivery, dispensing of medicine by a competitive private sector, meaning leaving the medical practices private, making the hospitals nonprofits again. Yes, once upon a time, the hospitals were private or locally run and owned, but nonprofit, making medical care more affordable. Before Reagan and Clinton, the 1980s and 1990s, screwing that up again. I would also encourage in the schools, and this would be funded, a program of hardcore physical fitness. I would also definitely slowly purge junk food and put good tasting regular food, high protein, good tasting vegetables and whatnot. I would also, there's so much I would do. The problems are solvable. It requires the political will and for us to liberate ourselves from ideology. So I know I've kind of gotten off the subject. So I conclude with this. We have to make our republic strong again. We have to make democracy real. And while it doesn't mean mob rule, because I don't support mob rule, masses are not always right. But I will tell you on the balance sheet, our economic and political elites have been so wrong and so short sighted and so selfish that they deserve very little influence in our federal government and our state and local governments. They'll have a say, but it will be very, very, very limited. And they will be watched uh, very closely by a federal government because they have sold out our economic sovereignty, they have sold out our national security. And that is unforgivable in my eyes. So I want to thank you all for listening to this program. I know I've said some really controversial things, but I have to be truthful with my beliefs. And good night. And I'm going to try and squeeze in one more live stream. Thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.